Statistics video series. You are watching Module 0, Video 0, where we're going to go over how to get set up with a lot of the tools I'm going to use throughout this series. So this is just the course outline where we're sitting right now. We are in the setup module. Key things I'm going to be talking about today are getting set up with an R environment and getting set up with Jupyter notebooks. And the method I'm going to suggest for getting set up with those is to use a package manager called Conda. And I'm going to show you briefly how to install that and just how to open up a Jupyter notebook and get started. Also going to go through some of the extra R packages I would suggest having installed for this series. Basically, as I go through all these different modules, I'm going to be doing a bunch of different examples in Jupyter notebooks, coding in R. And the idea is I'm going to provide a link to access all of these Jupyter notebooks so that you can download them and follow along if you would like, or just to have examples and use as reference. So let's jump right in. So to get Jupyter, or to get the Conda package manager installed, it's actually really simple to find. I highly suggest using what's called Mini Conda, which is just a smaller install to basically just get Conda. You can also install Anaconda, which is a bigger collection of things that's not just Conda, but also a bunch of GUIs and stuff to interact with it. For me personally, Mini Conda does everything I need, so I would suggest going that route. So if you just Google Mini Conda, go to the first thing that pops up, it'll be the Conda docs, and you'll have a bunch of links available for a bunch of different installers depending on what operating system you're on. Pick the Python 3.8 version, 64-bit operating system, all that. So download that and run the install script, and it should be, it's a very simple GUI. You just click OK, click through everything. On Windows, it might complain to you a little bit. I actually just set this up on my girlfriend's PC the other day to check it and make sure it didn't have any, unforeseen errors that I didn't know about. And the one thing that it did complain about was that my girlfriend's username had a space in it, and for some reason the installer was not a huge fan of that. So I personally just clicked through it and then I installed all the packages and went through everything I'm going to do today. And everything seemed to be working properly. I also was able to deactivate the environment and uninstall Miniconda without any issue. So personal advice, if it does complain to you about something like that, just click through it. Once you have it installed, if you're on a Mac or on a Linux, you can just pop open a terminal and you will already be essentially using Conda. If you are on a Windows, you're going to have to go down to the Start menu, the little search bar in the bottom left corner. Start typing in Anaconda or Miniconda, and two applications should pop up. One should be called like Anaconda PowerShell prompt, and one of them should just be called Anaconda prompt. Pick the PowerShell prompt. That's going to pop open a terminal that has commands that are similar to what I'm going to be showing today. Actually, I think all of the commands I'm going to be using on the command line here today are also available in PowerShell. Okay, so once you pop open one of these prompts, if you look to the left of your command prompt, it's actually going to say something funny like base. And what that actually is indicating is what Conda environment you're in. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but the basic idea is Anaconda or Conda, the package manager, allows you to have a bunch of different environments where you have different packages installed, and you can switch between environments depending on what your needs are. So if you want to see your environments, you can just go Conda info-e, hit enter, and that'll show you every single environment that you currently have set up, and it'll put a star next to the active one. So right now I've got this asterisk that says I'm in the base environment, and you can also see I have a bunch of just like random environments that I've used for projects in the past. Honestly, I use RBase and Py37 base for almost everything. Py37 if I'm doing Python, RBase if I'm doing R. You can actually install Python packages and R packages in the same environment. I don't for some reason. I don't know why. But anyway, that's Conda environments in a nutshell. So if you want to create an R environment, it's actually a relatively simple thing to do. And what you want to do is just go and again Google Conda R environment. And that should, using R language with Anaconda is one of the first things that pops up. And if you go to this web page, it's going to have some instructions for creating an R environment. Skip step 1 because we just downloaded and installed Miniconda. But literally to set up an R environment, you can just copy this command, paste it into your command line, and run it. The only thing that you might want to change is the r underscore end. That is the name of your environment. So if you looked at my environments, I named mine r base. You can name it whatever you want, but yeah, that's essentially how you get set up with it. So you hit enter, run that. It's going to ask you a couple things like, do you actually want to install these packages? Click through it, or type in Y and hit enter to respond yes when needed, and it'll install everything you need to get set up with R. That'll also install everything you need to run a Jupyter notebook. Before we actually dive into doing Jupyter notebooks, I'm going to talk about installing a couple extra packages though that I think are useful. So first thing though is after you set up your environment by running that conda create command, now you have to activate your environment. And the way to do that is either source or conda activate the name of your environment. So in my case, it's rbase. Whatever you named your environment, use that instead of rbase. And you're going to hit enter, and it's going to do a couple things, and it'll change this name over here to say now rbase is active. If you want to check that with the official command, now my asterisk is next to rbase. So that's all fine and dandy. So now I'm in my R environment. And now let's talk about a couple extra packages you're going to want to install. So the first one I would suggest is Jupyter Notebook Extensions. To do that, again, I would suggest Googling it and then go to this webpage, the unofficial Jupyter Notebook Extensions. These are user-contributed extensions to Jupyter Notebooks that you don't really have to use, but I highly, highly suggest installing these because there's a couple of them that honestly I couldn't really imagine using Jupyter without them. To install it, you have to run this command, conda install -c conda-forge. This is adding a channel that is essentially, Conda has some base or default repositories it looks at for finding packages. All this -c conda-forge does is say, look at this other repository that's at conda-forge to find this package. Anyway, you don't really need to know those details. If you want the extensions, literally just copy this into your command line, run it, and then you will have the notebook extensions. The other things you want to install, I'm going to be using, so when we installed R, there were some packages that got installed using this like r-essentials and r-base, but there's also a couple extra R packages that are worth installing while we're here. So one that would be worth doing is type in Anaconda or Google Anaconda R effect size. We're going to talk a lot about effect sizes, so this is going to be a useful one to have because it makes things a little bit simpler to calculate. So if you run this command, conda install -c conda-forge R effect size, that will get you the effect size R package. Another one that I personally find useful that I don't think comes default in the R essentials is broom. So if you want that one, conda install -c r-broom. The last one I would suggest installing is plotly. A lot of people who use R use ggplot. I use ggplot. Don't know why I'm saying a lot of people. Ggplot is amazing. Plotly is a nice add-on because it makes it so you can make interactive plots. So you can make plots where you can hover over points and it'll show things. And the reason that's really nice is because with Jupyter Notebooks, you can actually export them to HTML and send them to people. And then people don't have to have Jupyter installed. They can actually just open up that HTML and interact with the stuff that you've created. So Plotly is really nice from that perspective. So if you want that, just Google Anaconda Plotly R, and again, it should pop up on conda-forge with install instructions. Okay, so once you have all of those things installed, which I already do, so I'm not going to go through that because that would just be you guys sitting here and staring at my screen. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. I have a cat climbing on my computer. So once you have that installed, then navigate to a directory where you want to do some stuff. So I've created a directory for this. I'm going to cd into it. For those of you not familiar with prompts and command lines, cd is just change directory. ls lists what's in your current directory. So I'm going to cd to documents. I use tab to autocomplete. And then I am going to go to wherever the folder is that I set up for this, which is somewhere in here. Clinical stats for radiologists, all routes, and lecture 2. There we go. Okay, so go navigate to somewhere that you want to be, and then type Jupyter Notebook. And what this should do is pop open a web browser. If it doesn't, there will be a bunch of stuff that got spit out to your command line, and it should actually specifically tell you somewhere in here, there it is, to access the notebook, open this file in a browser. You can either paste that into a web browser, or you can paste one of these URLs into a web browser, and that should open up the server. So also, if it opens up a web browser that you don't like by default, there are ways to change that configuration. I would just suggest Googling how to do that. I'm not going to go into that here. Okay, so once you have the Jupyter server running, what you first want to do is go to this NB Extensions tab. This is actually only here because we installed that extra package, Jupyter Notebook Extensions. So you're going to click on that. Most likely when you start out, this box is going to be checked, which basically makes it so you can pick none of the extensions because a lot of these aren't actually officially supported anymore. But I would uncheck that. I have never had a problem with any of these not actually working with the newest versions of Jupyter, so just uncheck it. Couple ones that I would highly recommend checking. Table of contents too is incredibly helpful. Collapsible headings is another one. The Plotly widget extension, and the Code Prettify one actually requires a bit of extra setup that I'm not going to go through. But if you want to do it with R, Code Prettify lets you actually format your code automatically by pressing Control L, which is really nice because a lot of us, at least I, am terrible with keeping things pretty. Prereqs for it are in this page. You can it just says for R, the default implementation uses these packages. It gives you a command to run to install those. Do not run that command. That is assuming that you're using R's default package manager to install packages. Do not do that because we're using Conda. So instead, navigate back to your terminal and run, or well, Google it first so you know Conda format R and see is format R a thing, and if it is, then you install it this way. Same thing for the, I think it's JSON Lite or whatever that it wants for the other one. Once you have those installed, then you should be able to check Code Prettify and it should just work. Okay, so that's all getting set up. Now I'm just going to very briefly show you, how to get set up with this. So you can create, I totally didn't talk about that, but you can create a Jupyter notebook for R by going to New and then clicking R. You could also create a Python 3 notebook if you have Python 3 packages installed. Okay, so now you have an R notebook or a Jupyter notebook in R. There's a separate thing called an R notebook actually. To import packages in R, you use the library command, and one collection of packages that we're going to use in pretty much everything is called tidyverse. So if you type that in, run it, you can run it using either Shift Enter or Control Enter. Those should both run it. Shift Return or Shift Enter, I forget which. It goes to the next cell, whereas Control Enter keeps you in your current cell. It's spitting out a bunch of stuff to tell me that it did some things like registered S3 methods overwritten by ggplot2, and then here are the packages it's actually attaching. So tidyverse is actually a collection of packages, ggplot2, tibble, tidyr, readr, all of these things. Deeplyr, which I'm still not entirely certain how to pronounce. So that is a Jupyter notebook. A couple of cool things you can do with it. If you type M when you're in command mode, you can switch between command mode and editing by using Enter to get into the cell and Escape to get out of the cell or into command mode. When you're in command mode, if you type M, that converts the cell to Markdown. If you type Y, it goes back to code. When it's in Markdown mode, you can type 2, 3, or 4 to create sections, and if you have collapsible headings installed, it will make it so those sections are collapsible. So I can say hello section, and then I can create a cell below by hitting B, type in something, let's do another markdown cell, example, and then I can click this and now it's collapsible. Other fun things you can do, I can make a section, let's call it, I don't know, test. Oh, that didn't work. Test, because I didn't have the space. Let's make this one at the same level by using a single #, and then if you click, this is the table of contents install or extension. If you click on this, it's going to pop open a table of contents, and what's really fun, this is all linkable, so if you have a really long notebook, you can jump. Subsections will also appear in here. You can refresh it if you change things. Other fun parts, you can download your entire notebook as HTML or HTML with table of contents. I highly suggest doing this to share code with people, because what you can do is you can, download it like that. You can pop open your downloads, and then I currently don't have let's open it. You can open it in any web browser. I currently have it so that Google, for some reason, doesn't like opening things from my downloads folder. But anyway, this I just opened with Safari, and now check this out. I can link to all these different sections, which is, if it was a longer notebook, it would actually be jumping back and forth. I can pull the table of contents out, resize it, do stuff like that. And I can do all of this in a web browser with none of, this is dependent on none of the rest of the stuff I've done in this video. This is a great way to share your work with other people in a format that they can actually interact with. This is particularly useful when you have interactive plots so that people can actually look at your data and investigate individual data points. It's really great from that perspective. That's all I'm going to do for today's video. I'm trying to keep these relatively short. Next, we're going to start talking about, depending on which route you pick, whether you're doing continuous outcomes, categorical outcomes, non-parametric tests, we're going to start talking about actually diving into the statistics in R. So thanks for your time. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope to see you next time.